So good evening, everybody. We're going to start now very shortly. Our attendees are arriving. We have quite a large amount of attendees joining us this afternoon. And today, this is the second part of the Donegal Garda Youth Diversion Project Next Steps Summer webinar. And today is the motivational side of our webinar. Last week, and Jane will recap a little bit on that. What we had last week in terms of the educational opportunities that are out there for young people to attend college, regardless of what direction they have come. And I always say, if they were counting points way back in the 1980s, you know, education is not a one straight path, and there are many ways to get to where you need to. So Jane's going to recap a little bit. And also that webinar has been recorded and is available and currently is on the Foroige Donegal website or Facebook page, and also on the How I Got to Where I Am YouTube channel. So you can look back on the previous webinar to see what was happening at that. So we're joined today by Garvin Walker and Oisin Merritt, and we're very excited because this is very much at the motivational angle. And so in terms of stories, and How I Got to Where I Am is all about motivational stories and how we sometimes will hear a story and our direction will change as a result of that. And our stories are changing by the moment in terms of the direction they go on. Where we think we're going today may not be exactly where we end up. And certainly in terms of Garvin and Oisin, we will hear that very much. So again, joining us today as well is Meg O'Gara, who is with How I Got to Where I Am, and Jane McLean from the Donegal Garda Youth Diversion Project. And so I'm going to wait just another few moments because there's some people arriving and just want to make sure we get settled. This event is being recorded, and it will be available on YouTube, and it will be available on the Foroige Donegal Facebook page. So we'll just give another few moments while people arrive, and we'll just let you all settle in. And again, it's the Donegal Garda Youth Diversion Project Next Steps Summer webinar. And it does look a little bit like this is summer. We have a little bit of sunshine, but I think we're waiting on a little bit more later in the week. So I think we'll just get started now, and I'm going to pass you over to Jane McLean. As I say, Jane is with the Donegal Garda Youth Diversion Project, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what that is, why we're here today in terms of the motivational webinar that we're running today, and really what we hope will be achieved by that, and also what last week's and the education. So Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Evelyn. That's great. Hello to everybody. I'll just give a bit of background on the Garda Youth Diversion Project that I work with. So the Garda Youth Diversion Project in Donegal, we're managed by Foroige. It's a national youth organisation, and we work with young people who have offended or who are at risk of antisocial behaviour or who are at risk of crime. So I suppose that's a bit of background in relation to the project. The Next Steps webinars, it's a two-part series. So the last part, as Evelyn said there, was last week. And I suppose the purpose of these webinars is to inform, motivate and inspire young people, I suppose, to make positive choices in their lives. The first part, as I say, was last week. We had Fiona Kelly from the LYIT, and we had Gavin Stevenson from the Northwest Regional College in Derry, Limavady and Strabane. So both those guest speakers, it was fantastic to have them, and they spoke about young people engaging in education and further education while overcoming challenges. So some of the challenges mentioned last week were educational challenges, challenges around finance, and challenges around emotional support and mental health. So both Fiona and Gavin spoke about access courses in their centres, young people accessing the centres from a Leave Cert applied background or needing to do, as I say, to do access courses when they enter before the course of their dreams. They also spoke about grants and different grant opportunities and bursaries available to young people. And they spoke about the different support services within their colleges and also within the community. So as Evelyn said there, if anybody wants to access the webinar last week, it's available on the Foroige Facebook pages as well. So I suppose like to thank Garvin and Oisin just for taking the time today to talk to us. And I think we all take something from, other people's stories. It's the stuff that sticks with us, as other people's stories of overcoming challenges. We can all identify in some way, shape or form, even if we haven't had to walk the same path. We've all had some form of experience in relation to overcoming challenges, no matter what age we are, young or older. So I just like to welcome everybody today, and great to have Evelyn and Meg with us as well, true professionals. So I'll go back over to Evelyn now, and thank you very much for everybody for being here.
Great, Jane, that's fantastic. And we're delighted very much to be part of your event here today and to work with you. So I'm going to introduce next, very briefly, Meg O'Gara, who is the other half of How I Got to Where I Am. And she's going to explain very briefly what it is and why we're so happy to be involved with organisations like Foroige and the Garda youth events like this. Meg.
Thanks, Evelyn, and thanks, Jane. So yeah, as Evelyn said, my name is Meg O'Gara. I am the other half of the How I Got to Where I Am project. It is a motivational platform for people to come and join us, share your stories. Evelyn and I are such believers in the benefits of sharing your story, and how, that it can be so challenging when you see somebody at what you may think is their final destination, and often not realizing all of the obstacles, challenges and stumbling blocks that they have overcome and faced throughout their lives to get to that place of where they are. And so this is where the real value of the How I Got to Where I Am project came about. And we're so excited to be here with you guys, and partnered with the Foroige Youth Diversion Project to help show you what this platform is about, and how people's stories can help you benefit and see how people overcome obstacles and continue to do well and be successful.
Brilliant. Thank you, Meg. That's fantastic. And we certainly are excited to have two fantastic speakers join us today. Garvin is no stranger. He's been with us 2 weeks ago when we did our very first webinar with Foroige, not on the Garda Youth Diversion project, but on something else. So very much the stories, as we said, that we start out with are not what defines us. And that can be good, bad, and indifferent. So Garvin is going to talk to us in just a moment, and then we have Oisin Merritt, who is a completely different story. And again, we welcome them both very much together today. So Garvin, we're going to start with you. You're very welcome. Garvin Walker, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are.
Thanks. Great to be here, Evelyn. And I apologise for anybody who's logged on today who listened to me a few weeks ago. I'm not one of these boys who grab the mic. I have friends that love to grab the mic and push you out of the way to get on stage. The first time I done this was kind of to support Jane, a friend of mine, colleague, in her new position and stuff. And then I'm here now because I think you struggled to get somebody else, Evelyn. So
not at all. Did you hear that? Do you hear Garvin say that? No, Garvin, the reason why you're here is because you have a story that needs to be heard.
I'm only joking. Look, I'm here anyway, so look, I was too late to back out. And where I'm at, I mean, this is a big conversation. And again, as I started off talking the last time about, I would be a fairly sort of, anxious person at times when it comes to engaging in things that are unfamiliar to me, new environments and things like that. I can fall to pieces very handy. I usually go through that whole thing about, feeling nervous, not sleeping, feeling nervous, not sleeping, say going for a job interview, say, like I could be beat for 3 days before it. But normally you get through it and you feel stronger after. But when it comes to doing conversations about talking about emotions and feelings, overcoming barriers, obstacles, the humanity, the nature, the authenticity of just being a person, I find it very easy to chat, and I'm very mindful as well too, when we're doing things online, that you should share, in a general way and not go overboard in the personal stuff, to protect yourself and also to protect other people as well too, related to your story. But you can talk overall from the helicopter view, and you can, when I understand this question, how did you get to where you're at today? Trauma is I watched a documentary the other days, very, very interesting. It's called The Wisdom of Trauma. And it's circulating about there now, and it's absolutely fantastic. And just before I forget, people should check that out. And what the conversation is now with people in general, my role now as a youth justice worker, and the Garda Youth Diversion Project is kind of looking beyond the behaviour of a young person, looking beyond that behaviour and trying to identify, you know, what trauma has that person or individual gone through. And when you get an idea of trauma and where the trauma comes from, that can dictate and shape your emotions and feelings, and then that's going to dictate then your behaviours. You know, so I just think it was a brilliant documentary. So check it out if you can. But when I watched it, then I was kind of reflecting back to my role as a youth justice worker, working with young people, and then always speaking to that inner child that you take with you. You know, and that's always an ongoing conversation. And I don't think, you know, growing up, and for myself as well too, like I grew up in Letterkenny, and you know, if you want to find out about a person, learn about their childhood, learn about their environment they're brought up in, and then that's going to help to shape that. Like, you know, so when I brought up in Letterkenny, you know, the whole way through my childhood, you know, and without making yourself a victim or a martyr, like I always felt like I was outside looking in. And I always wanted to be somewhere else, with somebody else, doing something else. And I also believe then that every other family around the estate or where I grew up on had a far better situation than I had, you know. And I spent the whole time then chasing something that wasn't there to try and feel safe, you know. And then, you know, working through all that, like, you know, there's a couple of things in my childhood, like, and you know, I can identify with young people too that I work with as well too, was absent fatherism, like, you know. So my father wasn't about, you know, he had his own stuff going on. I would classify my mother as a survivor, and she has her own story to tell. And we had 3 children. Well, my mum had 3 children, and we grew up, you know, in that their household, you know, and the whole time when I was growing up, you know, there was a big question for me was, you know, abandonment. Like, why me? You know, and why was my father unavailable for us financially, emotionally, mentally, and everything? And not even available, but was actually, you know, very, you know, I had a negative influence, put it that way. Like, you know, so when I got to the age of 13, I had these massive questions that were never identified, that my mum tried to shield us from through her own life, you know. And my mum remarried around that age as well too. And at that time, you know, the pendulum has certainly swung now, that, you know, more young people are chatting about emotions and feelings. And if there's divorce going on in the house, it's a very healthy conversation to talk about that and to help the young person see that it's not actually about you. If a parent split, it's because relationship between them and it's not associated with you. But when you're young and you haven't got the language to articulate that, you internalize it, and particularly boys at that stage then don't want to expose any emotions and feelings, because I came from a household told that if you show any weakness, you know, that's not a good thing, you know. So weakness is something that you should always try and hide and suppress, and which is absolutely, it's nearly worse than the one about, you know, children should be seen and not heard. I think we've outgrown that one within culture and society, but, you know, it's nearly on the same par as that, like, you know. But I had all these questions, a lot of anger built up within me, like, you know, and I was steady in at that stage then trying to demonstrate to the world that I was okay. But deep within in my side, I felt loss, I felt trauma, I felt stress, I felt anxiety. I felt like I had nobody to protect me. And for a child to feel like, you know, not safe or not valued, it's like, I mean, the road's kind of laid out for you then, because what you're going to do then is you're going to try and fix feelings with feelings, and you're going to try and find places within society and culture that you feel that's going to keep you safe. So I was on the estate, and amongst all the young fellas that were all together, we're actually like, there was a camaraderie between the whole lot of us, like, because we were all trying to feel safe. And there was very little old boys about, to be honest with you. Like, there was very little positive role male models, and we were very much, you know, an island within ourselves, if you know what I'm trying to say. And we all stuck together. And if you hit one of us, you hit the whole lot of us. And I just fell in love with that because I felt safe, and as a safety that I wasn't really getting from the house. And then as the years went on, then you know, and my mum did her very best. There was always dinner there. You know, we always got the Santa presents, you know, we always got to school. But I could just see the trajectory in from like 13 to 14. I was very, very much involved in sports. Whoever was the manager of the football team or Gaelic team or the boxing coach, I used to always try and impress them, looking for validation and approval. And, you know, I would over exceed, and I would really push myself. And normally what happened then, when you get that bit of approval then, that's not enough, and you'll go and seek it somewhere else, and you go seek it somewhere else. And the whole time you're just looking for your old boy to say, well done, son. And that wasn't there. And that wasn't there. And that was just the reality. So at 16 years of age, you know, I managed to get through school. I got a leaving cert and all that. But the party life was getting a bit too much. The social life was getting a bit too much. And as the time went on, then I could feel myself that prioritizing what was social and what was the crack was getting out of hand. You know, the cost of a drink was costing much more than just the price. You know, getting involved in mood changing behaviors and mood changing substances. And then the whole time there was just an underlying issue of like just wanting to feel safe, just can't cope with reality. I don't think I can do much, and so forth, you know. So what happened to me then was very interesting. You know, I got, you know, I would say from the age of probably 16, 17, all the things that I valued in life, like the stuff that you say, you know, it takes a community to raise a child, all the positive influences in my life, I started to push away. And I learned this word resentment. And I never knew that was. And I realized then, you know, at a certain age, at 25 years of age, that I was full of a resentment. Now, that was hurt and brokenness as well too, and all that there kind of stuff. But when you're feeling so negative within yourself, you can't have a normal relationship with people around you, because you always have this inferior, superior complex going on, and you never really feel part of anything. And at 25 years of age, I had this sort of like, I would call it a spiritual awakening, to be honest with you. I had got to a place in my life where I was sitting in my house that me and my sister were living together at the time, and things like that. And I had yet missed another Monday, and I had yet went on another binge, and all the stuff that's associated to that, the financial cost and this, that, and other. And I went to lift the phone to ring up. I was working in a factory at the time, and I was always a good worker. I was always like on time, and you know, I would have got stuff done, like, you know, just tell me to do it, I'll do it, and stuff like that. Like, but I always knew that I'd be unreliable at certain periods of the month as well, like, you know, so I was kind of like clocking up brownie points and wee bit manipulative as well too, like, you know. But I went to ring up the phone to my line manager and just say, look, I'm beat here. I'm beat. Like, I'm not even going to tell you now that, you know, I missed work because the tire went flat, or, you know, all the excuses that you do to shield yourself from feeling powerless over substances, like, you know. And he says, oh, thank God, Garvin, like, you know, we all know that you're struggling, but you're a good lad. You know, that's the exact words he said. And I said, well, I'm booked, to be honest with you. I'm not going to curse now as recorded, because that's the way I feel, like, you know. And I feel like I have no control on my life. I just feel like everything's just spinning out of control, blah, blah, blah. So when I lifted my hand at 25 years of age to ask for help, that's when everything changed. And then when I asked for help, then it was if then that vulnerability that I call strength came out. And then people around me then that were in the same mindset, their vulnerability came out. So then I started getting sort of, you know, my circle changed then with people that were in recovery, people that talked about healing from emotions, people talked about therapy, getting well, it's okay not to be okay, dealing with the emotions and getting in a better mindset. Things started to change for me then. Like, you know, when I went to a couple of places to come out, I learned all about alcoholism, I learned all about substance abuse, and I learned why I was struggling so much with reality. And it was that word resentment. And I was in that factory. Sorry, I'll just kind of wrap it up now. We had a very sort of, like, it was HR kind of factory. They're a very good American crowd, like, you know. And they would have these sort of wee events every couple of months, like about, you know, positive mindsets and all this kind of stuff, like, you know. And when you're feeling so rough, right, and you're just feeling so hostile and negative, with bold, you know, low self-esteem and stuff, and then you're told then, like, just say a wee mantra, you know, just be positive, like, you know, it's sunny outside, and like when it was sunny outside, I wanted it to rain. I didn't want to see sun, like. I didn't want to see anybody happy, because I was so unhappy. Like, I want everybody else to feel the way I was feeling. Why are you not all struggling the way I'm struggling? Like, you know, all this unidentified trauma stuff going on, like, you know. And they got this guy in, and she got this here woman, and she was a nun apparently back in the day, right? And she said to me, and I said this to Jane before, she said to the group, you know, if you do two things for yourself now, right, is to drink lukewarm lemon juice in the morning and buy yourself the most expensive, dearest, go and get go bankrupt to get yourself bed linen for your bed, Egyptian cotton, go flat out and make your bed just like the most safest place you can ever be, right? And here's me in the midst of the party scene, the rave scene, just one of those boys with the glow sticks, yeah. So I'm in that kind of way, right? And to pretend to be okay, and it really just touched me what she said, right? I said, she's right. And then she went on to say, and I was having an issue then with a girl at work at the time because it was just the way I was. I was having issues with everybody at that time, but it wasn't even her. But me and her had beef, and she got us to stand up and turn around and put your hand on the shoulder of the person beside you. Right? Now, this is far out done for Irish culture because we're not like that. We're not touchy-feely, And then she goes, if you have resentments, and this is when the first time I heard this word, if you have a resentment and you try and push it down and keep pushing it down, it's like a seed. And that seed's going to grow into a tree. And it's going to keep growing. And that resentment's going to get more and more and more. And I've learned later in life then that resentment means refill old hurts. Refill. So if you haven't dealt with hurts before, you keep refilling them, and then when you can't handle that, you change your reality. You take substances or gambling or, for young boys now, porn or whatever it may be, food, self-harm, whatever it may be. They just to change the reality that you're in because it's too hard for you to cope. As a coping mechanism. So you're actually, so if I talk to anybody now who's in drinking or drugging or whatever the things I said there now, they need this to stay alive because the reality is too much. Anyway, so she went on to say, don't try and push resentment down. And then straight away I thought, oil boy. And this is the start of the whole journey for me then. So I had as you said earlier on there, trauma and things in life don't necessarily shape your trajectory moving forward, but you have to take that stuff with you. And I look at all that there totally different now. Well, I'm 37 years of age, at 25, I started living the life of abstinence from done the sobriety. Don't do any mood changing chemicals or any mood changing substances or nothing like that now. So I'm very clean living and I'm able to talk about these things in a different way. And people tell about, how did you get where you are? I started to be honest and to recognize it's okay to be okay. I get honest with myself, I feel like I'm talking too long here, Evelyn.
No, Garvin, no, you're great. And I didn't stop you for that very reason, because I think remembering that who this is for, it's for anybody, but it's for the young people that are listening. First of all, we need that honesty. We need somebody like you to stand up and say, do you know what? I was there and I'm here now. And so that they can see, and you spoke about the inner child. And I mean, I think that's very important. And that honest approach. Before you wrap up, I also though want to touch on, because you told a lovely part of this story before, was that there also that you were dyslexic, and that somebody approached you and asked you to sort of to show up for your college. I mean, in terms of that, there's a whole sector there that you haven't touched upon, and we don't really have the time. But I do want you to share then that, because I think today what you've looked at, you've shone a light on the previous part of your life that you didn't the last time, and the last time you shone the light on the fact that you went to college, and now you're inspired and motivating young people at all different levels. And because you've experienced that, you now are able to help them get through that. So I just want you to very briefly tell us about that idea of somebody showing up for you and asking you to show up.
Yeah, well, again, and that's everybody needs somebody to have in your corner, so to speak. And traditionally, I would have been seeking advice from characters that you shouldn't be seeking advice from, as nearly a justification. It's us against them, and it's all that tribalism stuff. And that's a whole different. I'm not start chatting about that. I get confused myself. But when you're going into education, right, and you're coming from, say, a chaotic household with some of the fancy lingo we would use, and you're feeling anxiety and trauma, right? You have to sit down and navigate your way through algebra, or try and study poetry, or do geography, or retain information when you're completely in a fight or flight mode, because everything is a threat to you. Everything's a threat to you. So I think it's sometimes unfair. So I would have judged myself on my capabilities to that young person. Clean, stupid, no good, can't hold on to information, not for me, it's for everybody else. When I went back to college, I was working on a petrol station in 2010, and I got on well with the manager, and he was trying to help me out. And he goes, Garvin, it's minus, remember that cold winter? It's minus 20 out here. I can get you into the shop to the till. New environment, don't like it. No, I'm going to stay here. He thought it was off my head. He kept trying to help you out. It's warm. It's comfortable in there. You get a longer break. No, I'm going to stay where I am because it's very comfortable. So I started judging myself off that young lad who went into school, managed to get through it. It's an absolute miracle that I managed to get through it on his capabilities, not be able to identify all the stuff, the barriers that came up. So there was a period of my life then where there was two people come up and said to me, Garvin, I think that you're a capable young fella. You know, you're bright enough, you're getting on grand. Surely you have your, you know, there's things you struggle with and like everybody else, but you're capable. And she said to me, will you do one thing for me now when you embark on this journey of sobriety and stuff like that? Go back to college and give it another go again. So when I walked back into the LYT, I thought the whole place was looking at me. I thought to myself, what in the name of God what am I doing here to start off with? Like, I mean, I should not be here. These are for other people who want to progress in life. I'll just give me a brush. I'll go somewhere else and I'll just crack on. But I needed to hear somebody to perk me up and say, you can do it and you can do it. And now where I'm at in life now, fast forwarding that, you know, you have to make sure that yes, recognize that and demonstrate that you understand, you know, your own vulnerabilities. But then you have to come off the cross and not play the victim mode all the time, and know where you can make personal responsibility decisions and crack on, and not lie back and say, well, I find that too difficult. You don't know what I've went through and all that, which the pendulum has totally swung in Irish society from don't open your fucking mouth. They never stop saying how victimized you are, because, you know, it's kind of got down there now. So it's trying to find out where the middle ground is, where you can progress the rights and responsibility debate type of thing, like, you know.
Brilliant. Well, listen, that is fantastic. And I mean, certainly, you know, in the whole coaching realm, the victim and the victor is sometimes where we all are caught, because sometimes we think life's tough and poor me and that shouldn't have happened. So we come across as the victim. And then when we step into, you know, owning it, as you say. But Garvin, that was absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate all that. We'll come back to you at the end for some words of wisdom and maybe some questions that come in. So now I'm going to pass you over and again, anyone who has any questions, please put it in the chat and we'll ask those questions at the end. So now we're going to introduce you to Oisin Merritt, and Oisin has a very interesting story to tell. I'm not going to even start stepping into part of his story. I'm just going to let him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about how he got to where he is. Oisin, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. I suppose to start then, thank you very much for getting me into all this. This is amazing. You're also welcome. And Garvin, what an amazing story. I mean, me and Garvin have two radically different stories, but just there's so much in his story that I can resonate from, you know, what I could take from that and apply it to myself. So I suppose as we met the first time, we were saying, is this question is how I got to where I am. I went away and, you know, I thought, like, how did I get to where I am? As, you know what? I'm not going to come to this no scientific literature. I'm just going to tell my story, because, you know, sometimes you have to discover your own story. But I suppose, like, in a lot of the points Garvin was saying there about Irish society and, you know, don't speak to this, play the victim. I suppose there's a lot of the stuff I would take as well. And, you know, comparing yourself to others and kind of judging your self-worth from social media likes or whatever it may be. But I suppose that's where my story began, was when I was younger. I mean, 15, 16, growing up, I was kind of, I mean, it's not like an Irishman to take a compliment, but when I was a child, I would have been very good at sports. And I suppose I played football at a fairly high level. I would have played with Sligo Rovers and Finn Harps back when I was late teens, you know. But on reflection, and looking back then, like, I would have judged my whole character, who I was, of how good my sporting ability was, you know. And I suppose, well, I had a traumatic accident and kind of made me reevaluate, well, you know, there's more to me than just sporting ability, you know. But I suppose back when I was 19, I was playing for Finn Harps, kind of breaking in and out to the reserves and just moving up from the under-19 team. I went on a holiday with my friends, like I suppose every young lad does at that age, over in Santa Ponsa. But that was where my whole life was going to change. And as traumatic as the accident was, and as horrific as it was, I suppose it's probably, ironically, one of the better things that's ever happened to me in my entire life, because I was able to recharge and go again, you know. But I fell off a balcony, probably 18 foot high, Didn't have the best landing, landed on my head onto concrete steps. So obviously it was horrific accident. Straight away over in Spain, then I would have been put into a coma and on life support to try to save my life. In that coma, I'd stay for, I think it was just around a month, or maybe a day over a month. But it was a horrific time for family. I mean, I was out, so obviously I didn't get the worst of that, but it kind of progressively got worse when I was in a coma because the damage that was done to my brain. There was multiple brain hemorrhages. It even says there's too many brain hemorrhages to count. It was kind of a pool of blood. They had to do rough surgery where they would have removed half my skull, you know, to try to keep me alive. It progressively got worse and worse. And I'm from Ballbafay, and this amazing town that you can't speak of. Nobody likes to speak of, but I personally can't speak highly enough. They rallied together and they got my family, my parents, my partner, my sister. They all flew out to be at my bedside over there. But basically, while they were there, it was so they needed permission to turn off a life support because I wasn't coming back. About 3 weeks into the coma, the doctor called my parents into the office and literally word for word says, your son is hanging on from a spider's web with a baby finger, and it's going to snap anytime, and it's probably going to snap tonight. But he's a fit lad. I never smoked. I never really drank back then. Definitely never smoked. I did everything right. Did everything by the book. I was an athlete. I was trained 6 days a week. You know, so they says like we'd love to have his organs. They're very healthy. So they commenced the paperwork to taking my organs. But I don't know if it was coincidence or if it was delay we needed. But around that time, the machines was all these flashing lights in ICU. You know, the pressure of the brain, and then started dropping, and from being literally a dead man with no hope to about 3-4 days later they're talking about bringing me out of the coma. So it was, just they brought me out of a coma. And I know you see in movies, you know, you wake up in a movie and they start chatting, oh, I was gone for a while. It's not the movie. It takes a week or so to come out of a coma, and there's gradual progressions. But when I woke from that coma, I suppose that's where the journey really started. I mean, at that time I couldn't speak really. I had no movement in my left side. I was in a wheelchair, where I continued to be in that wheelchair for about 10 months, I think. And even after I got out of the wheelchair, I still would have no movement in my left arm. Still have a lot of trouble down my left side. But it was where the journey started, I suppose, where as a child, at that age, 19, you took away my sporting abilities, and, you know, I felt naked. I didn't know who I was, you know, and that's how I kind of learned to develop who I was. But I was flown home on an air ambulance. Spent a lot of time recovering. I mean, I was down to skin and bones at this stage where I was hanging together. Obviously, being in a coma for a month, you're not going to eat solid foods. But I was down to a very, very sick boy. So they had to try to build me up to the point where they had to keep me in hospital until I was able to actually start rehabilitation. And then sent me down to the National Rehab in Dublin, which is just an amazing facility. What that place has done for me, I am forever grateful. It is such an amazing facility. But that's where the work started. That's where I had to learn to speech and language therapy, back to walking again, trying to eventually walking by myself unassisted. And eventually when I got on my feet, I was trying to get the left arm moving, and then trying to stay on your feet. I have serious balance issues. I'm deaf in my left ear. There's so much things with the injury that people don't see. And I think that was kind of part of the journey as well, was when you're alive and sure, he's fine now, he's grand, he's back on his feet, you know, like he's top, you know. But there was a lot of work. I was told by the experts that I would never be able to maintain a normal life again, that I wouldn't have the mental capacity. There was too much damage to the brain where I wouldn't be able to have a normal life again. And just on that note, I finished college 3 weeks ago with an honors degree. So I suppose that lit a fire within me to prove them wrong or prove myself right as such. But I was told the works. I mean, I was told you'll not be able to do a normal life. You'll never go to college. You might not walk again unassisted. You might not move your left arm ever again. You'll never come back to any sporting capacity. You'll never do this. You'll never do that. And I suppose for a long time, I looked at that as proving them wrong. And I suppose I don't have any other words to describe that, but I can still to this day picture the doctor telling me, you won't, and that just lit a fire under my chair, lit a fire in my stomach, and I did everything from that point on to defy that, to be back to who I was, or to get back to as close to who I was as I can, or to be a better person than I was before, quite frankly. I mean, it took me a long time. I'm 7 years on from this accident, and it's maybe within the last year or two that I'm able to actually recognize, well, hang on, I achieved something. You know what I mean? I kind of did this work. People say you're so lucky, and so I am. All the rest, but well, I was the first one at rehab, and I was the last to leave, even though rehab meant passing out with pain, morphine, a lot worse. I mean, there was the works. It was horrific, and there was nothing pleasurable. It wasn't this movie montage you see where it's horrific, and there is no other words about it. But the pain, the trauma, it was absolutely horrific. But I went through that to get where I am, and I suppose, like Garvin, going back to college and stuff, you can take that from any other thing. I suppose you have to find within you what motivates you. You know, at that point, it's not going to be sport and ability, but it's going to be to be who I am. And I suppose coming out of rehab, and when I got back, did all the work, did all the hard work to be back on my feet. I actually ended up representing the Ireland Paralympic team, and still currently do every year. But I suppose that's where the journey really started, was when I got out of Dunleary, which I was in Dunleary for approximately 10 months. I got out just in time for Christmas. And then here I am from 6-7 days a week, structured. You have speech and language at 9, you have physio at 10, you have occupational therapy at 12, your lunch here, your dinner here, and the structured people call and text, and you're all the support. How are you now, and how are you doing? To I'm at home with nobody, and life goes on. So, you know, your people have to go back to work, people go back to college, your friends start to go back going out and enjoying their life, obviously, like you're going to do. Life goes on, and here I was at home by myself with still barely any movement in my left side, still couldn't do what I wanted to do, still wasn't allowed. At this point, I'd only half a skull, so I couldn't go socialise, I couldn't do anything. And that's when I suppose the mental journey began, and for me, that's maybe my proudest fight. That was the real fight, and my proudest achievement is kind of coming from the darkest days where you're kind of shattered. And I heard someone say before that, and I genuinely believe that, I do think that you have to be nearly destroyed, or you have to be reach the lowest lows to really discover who you are. I mean, the person I am now is very, very different to the person I was before that holiday, or when I was playing football and that. So it was kind of similar to Garvin, reinventing your circle, your family, what means what to you, who's important to you, and what motivates you. I was able to, I suppose, nearly like a spiritual revelation again, but I kind of got very deep into meditation, headspace, mindfulness, and gratitude, and practiced that quite a lot. And that was able to get me through to where I am now, to where, of course, we're all human, we're going to have bad days. I mean, people think this social media life is the perfect life, or they look at that, they're in a beach class, but people have bad days. We all do, the best of us do, and we're going to do that. So how we deal with that is kind of who we are. How we come back from this is who we are as a person. You know, it builds your character, it turns you into who you are and what makes you happy, etc. But yeah, as I say, with Garvin, you can resonate a lot. There's two completely different stories, but there's so much similarities that I could take from that, and listen to other people's stories. There's so much you can take. But on that as well, with the, again, being completely open, and a lot of people wouldn't even notice me, but I fought depression for a long time coming out of rehab. Family, loved ones, friends were unbelievable. I've got a partner in the other room there that told me at 19 years of age, when she was a student in her final year and full-time working as well, that I'm not going back to college, or I'm not going back to work until you're out of this wheelchair and who you are again, like, you know. So I mean, family, friends, surround yourself with the right people can be the real key, I suppose, to getting to where you need to be and back on your feet.
Oisin, that's absolutely amazing. And we have spoke before, so I know a little bit about that. But I just think that today we were looking for great motivational speakers, and Garvin and yourself just have blown us away in terms of that. So in terms of those dark days, and certainly people were there for you and were supporting you. What was your vision at that stage? Did you have a vision for the future? Or, was it just literally being pain free, or was it getting out there? Or you know, even in terms of going back to college, like how difficult was that to fill in the CAO forms or to put the application? Where did you get your belief from, I suppose, really is the question.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a really difficult one to answer. And openly honest, my mother likes to be nice and call it determination. But let's be honest, I'm that stubborn that I won't let nobody tell me what I'm not going to do. But that stubbornness, that bit of determination, if you like, that was never going to hold me back. I mean, somebody telling me you couldn't do something was just going to motivate me even more to do it. But I suppose coming away from that, it's you really have to find, and again, this sounds very cliche, but you really have to find who you are, what makes you happy. Well, you know what, it turns out I love golf now. You know, I'm actually not that big into football. You know, it's what makes you happy is kind of where you're going to be. And I suppose no matter how dark the darkest days are, the sun's going to rise in the morning. And I suppose, can you focus on that sun rising and the future we had ahead of us? At that point, the future wasn't too bright, but I knew that it's up to me to write my future. I could have sat in the hospital bed and says, you know what, that doctor says I can't do this. Well, I can't. I'm going to feel sorry for myself, and I'm going to play this victim card, and I'm going to blame society, and I'm going to blame bad doctors, and I'm going to blame this, that, and the other. You know what? I fell. That was on me, and I'm a big believer of looking in, not out. And first thing I always try to do is something happens to you is, well, why? You know, I'm not going to try to blame John down the street or this, that, and the other. Can I look in? Well, you know what? I was the one that fell. It was nobody's fault but my own. So I need to be in charge of getting me better. I'm not going to rely on my parents or whatever to help me be better. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to put in the hard yards. I'm going to find out who I am, and I'm going to find out what's going to make my future as bright as it can be. And thankfully, it's looking like a very bright future.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. And it's interesting, again, as we said, Garvin and Oisin had two very, very different stories and different directions. And there is the one vein that runs through it, though, is that victim and victor, that we all feel that everybody in life sort of in their journey looks at and steps into on occasion. And in terms of the future, Oisin, so you've actually just got your degree. Congratulations! That's no mean feat. Well done. And what was the degree in?
Sports psychology, sports coaching and psychology.
Okay,
life
great.
Coaching.
And what would your vision then now? What's the plan? What would Oisin Merritt like to do in the next with the rest of his life, or the next part of the story in 20 years when somebody says, "How did you get to where you are?" What's the plan, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, and even going back on that Irish culture, realizing that you're kind of taking compliment or taking some credit for what you've done. That's something that's really drilled into us Irish folks is, now you can't do that. It's somebody else did it for me, you know. But realizing now that I've only really recently realized that if I just tell my story, that I didn't believe how is this going to help someone. Like I'm only chatting about myself, sure. Nobody's going to want to listen. Like, but trying to realize that if I share my story, then if there's 10 people watching this, if one boy or girl or man or woman takes something from this, then I'm just delighted. But on the grander scale, I suppose that I and Garvin and every individual alike, we have our stories, and I would love to continue sharing my story. I suppose I really want to go down to a more psychology-based future. Obviously, motivational speaking or working with teams or athletes and try to continue their performance, but not only athletes and teams, people. If I could do life coaching and help them improve their lifestyle choices and how their life's going, that would just be brilliant. I suppose I've got this story now, and I would like to help others in any way I can.
That's fantastic, Oisin, really brilliant. And there's a very funny story. I have a friend who actually went to, Oisin was working in a gym and he was doing some fitness therapy with him. And she said to me that, Oisin just was phenomenal in what he was doing. And he was kind of, the belief among them all was, well, if Oisin can manage to do this, we should manage the burpees or whatever was needed. So I think definitely Oisin has a great story to tell, as has Garvin. I think all of you that are listening to this either now or in the recorded version, we're going to go back to Garvin and Oisin for their kind of top tips for you. But I suppose what I've taken from that is that regardless of where your situation or where you begin, whether you have the perfect family life or you have a difficult family life, whether you believe that you're stupid or that you are of academic qualifications beyond measure, that there will be something that will come along that will stop you in your tracks, that will make you feel that you're the victim or feel that you're the victim. And it's really, I suppose, then it's about people, it's about who you let into your life, it's who can help you, who you can talk to reach out, and to just, you know, and Oisin touched on it a little bit in terms of social media. So not to be looking and thinking that the world is amazing. And again, that's not a teenage thing. That's going right up into sort of older age groups as well, that the world of fear of missing out, and maybe that was something during the pandemic, was that everybody was in the same situation. So nobody felt that FOMO, that fear of missing out. So I'm going to go back to you, Garvin, now, and I'm just going to ask again, thank you for sharing your wonderful story with us. And I think that certainly there was a number of things that you said that will really touch upon the young generation that are listening, but also, you know, I'm blown away by your honesty, by your ability to share your story, to tell it. And again, I think Oisin touched that little bit about Irish culture, you know, that there's that fear of like, who am I to say or to speak or whatever. But I just want to say that I found your story incredibly inspiring, and I know that others will. Have you any sort of last minute pieces of advice or wisdom, or that you want to share with us all, not just the younger generation?
I always laugh when somebody asks me for wisdom. But no, it was great listening to Oisin there too. And I couldn't help thinking, you know, the common thread between a whole lot of it, you know, was people helping each other, like, you know. And Oisin mentioned there now, he had a lot of gratitude for the services available to help him, you know, with the accident and the community getting together. And then going out there and then actually working through the whole thing now and dealing with what he has to deal with and the therapy and rehabilitation piece, like, you know, and that's very much the same for me as well too. You know, a lot of people helped out, but at some point I had to put the hand up and be willing to be helped, you know, and to recognize that, you know, that I did need help, like, you know, and if I think I can do something, I'm right. And also if I don't think I can do it, I'm also right. You know, sometimes it's nearly as simple as that. But we are, you know, I'm glad now that the role that I have working for Foroige and as a youth justice worker, like, we're here now to help people who are coming from more and more of a disadvantaged place in society, to give them a fair lash at it, like, you know, and not everybody comes from the same place, you know. And I'll just, you know, the Irish Justice Service, you know, connected to Foroige, we go up to an annual conference, and they had your man Pat Dovely. He's kind of like one of these inspirational speakers, and he's going around doing his thing as well too, you know, maybe monetizing it to a certain point, but there you go. That's all part of it. But he was speaking, and in the whole room, I could hear he's chatting about anxiety, self-esteem, things like that there, and all the suits, all the, you know, the kind of more senior positions are up the top, and then as you walk through the room, then we're all found our place. But I'd be very, very much used to the tone that he's talking about, and it wasn't unfamiliar for me. It was chatting about just being vulnerable and stuff like that. But when I looked around the whole room, and you could hear a pin drop when he was chatting about himself and how he was working through stuff. And no matter who you were, what you were, where you're coming from, that connection to another person who's trying to speak, everybody's engaged. Now, when you start waffling on the ego and start, you know, giving advice and being too out there, people just switch off and you get that sense, you know. So anyway, I have no words wisdom other than keeping it real. You know, it's okay to be yourself, and when you shine a light on the darkness becomes the light, you know. And that is the truest saying that I've ever come across, like, you know.
Well, that Garvin, and I mean, definitely you do have great words of wisdom, and you've had great words of wisdom that went out there today, even though you may not be aware that they were. And in terms of the motivational speakers and the speakers that stand up and tell their story, like, we have to be so admiring of them as well, because they have, you know, to put themselves out there. You know, Oisin and I have spoke briefly about this in terms of telling your story, putting it out there. People judge, and people will say, oh, well, this, that, and the other. And so it's a brave thing to do. Even what you two have done today in terms of this entire webinar or other webinars, we've had some great speakers who've been very brave how I got to where I am, the program itself. In terms of that, there is brave stories and fantastic stories, motivational, inspirational. But I think that overall, just that advice and wisdom that you share has been fantastic. So Garvin, thank you so much for that. Oisin, I'm going to come to you now for those similar types of, last little bits of advice that you would give someone who's listening. And, there are some people out there now who I have no doubt that will have listened to this and thought, well, you know what, if he survived that, I can survive what I'm going through. If Garvin survived what he was going through as a young fella, then I go to college and now work with young people and inspire and motivate, then I can do that. So I think really already both of you have really delivered something amazing today that people will take with them. But I suppose I'm going to finish off now, Oisin, with just asking you for those words of wisdom.
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself old and wise just yet. Maybe another few years I might be old and a bit wiser. But no, I mean, with culture and society, and especially social media society, we can all easily get carried away, and in that process lose yourself in trying to portray an image that may not be you. But I suppose if you work, as I always say, what got me through a lot of the accident is if I work harder in the darkness, my success and my happiness will be that light, But time is probably the constraint that we put in ourselves. I mean, you were telling me your amazing story about how you started this business a bit later in life. This time constraint is only a limit that we put on ourselves. There's no time for happiness. I mean, it can come whenever it comes, it's going to come. But if you find yourself and find what makes you happy, it will be there. I suppose it's kind of, no matter how dark the dark days, the sun's going to rise in the morning. And above all else, never lose sight of hope.
That's absolutely fantastic. And again, that whole sense of, not putting a sense of time on us. We don't have to do something within a certain time. And both Garvin and Oisin spoke about light, which is really, shining the light on it, moving into the light and bringing that sort of clarity to it. We have a message in here, just someone has said, amazing webinar, well done, and thank you, Oisin, Garvin, for sharing your stories, very inspiring. We have another message here saying, wow, talk about a pin dropping. There certainly couldn't be but a pin drop there. So that was Garvin, I think, in reference to you saying somebody was speaking and there was a pin hadn't been dropped. So I'm going to go back now to Jane just to wrap it all up and to thank everybody for coming. I know she's certainly like ourselves. And the thing is, no matter how many webinars we do like this, or no matter how much work we do as coaches in how I got to where I am, we're still always so inspired and motivated by real, true, authentic stories. And that's what we certainly got today. And I know for sure, and I'm sure Meg feels the same, and Jane, that these stories will actually make a huge difference to somebody when they listen to them. So I'm just going to pass over to Jane again before we wrap it all up.
Thank you, Evelyn. Garvin and Oisin, well done. That was amazing, and I'm sure not easy, but both stories, as everybody has said, were different, but just really inspirational. I suppose Garvin mentioned at the start about why he was asked. Garvin wasn't asked to do this because he had a difficult journey. He was asked because Garvin has an amazing level of self-awareness. And I suppose as a colleague and a friend, I see that on the daily, and I see him, the way he works with young people. It's not book read. He's lived it, and he's done the work to repair and to recover, and he's such an asset to Foroige. So it's just, I always get something from listening to him talking. So not to give him a big head, I'll move forward. Oisin, congratulations on your sports coaching and psychology degree. Well done. Absolutely amazing, and just amazing to hear you talk about, like, after all the physical and mental pain that you've been through, to hear you talk about things like gratitude, and that your proudest fight being your mental fight. Like, it's if that doesn't inspire people, I don't know what would. I suppose for me, coming from the Garda Youth Diversion Project perspective and point of view, I feel that, I suppose in general, a lot of these emotional stories and emotional, I suppose, mental health stuff, and a lot of it's the messages are coming from women, and in our project we work with mostly young men. So it's just amazing today to hear these stories of self-awareness, of overcoming challenges, of reaching out, looking for support and getting the support from two young men, which is just, That's fantastic, and it's fantastic that this is a recorded resource as well, that can be used. This content and this information today is relevant for forever more men, as far as I can see. So I suppose just finally to say thank you both so much for being so honest and being with us today. Just in relation to any young person that is connected in with us today or is viewing this down the line, if anything has affected you within the hour today, or if you want to access support services, there are so many. You could link in with your Foroige support worker. There are many services, or an adult that you trust, or if you need signposted to the services within your own community, just ask somebody who, as I say, who you trust and who you know, and somebody maybe within Foroige. We're all here to help. So yeah, just as Garvin said, the common thread, I suppose, is that the support and the connection and the determination. So I just think well done, and I leave it at that. Thank you all very much.
Great, that's fantastic. So just before we wrap up, yes, thank you all very much. Thank you to Jane and all the team, and thank you to Oisin, thank you to Garvin and Meg for coming along today as well. This recording will be available, and I will send you both links, but also it will be available on How I Got to Where I Am YouTube channel, and it will also be available on the Foroige Donegal Facebook page. I know that what you've done today and the things that you've said, Oisin and Garvin, will make a difference to somebody who hears it. And I think that's the most overwhelming result from today, is that really you will inspire and continue to motivate as you both do. I'm sorry to see it come to an end, but we have to say goodbye. I think the sun is just starting to come out. I know Jane's dog is barking, he needs a walk. My dog has been sitting in looking through the door here, waiting to be taken for a walk. So thank you all so much, and we look forward to seeing you all again. And from Meg and myself and How I Got to Where I Am, thank you so much. Goodbye.